Hello everybody. In this first video, we're just going to be going over the basics of the program. What this means is just the tools, the layout, and how to interact with the software. So before we start, I just wanted to highlight some of the important things about the program. You're going to see there are a multitude of toolbars and options that you can select, and they each have their own meaning, and some are more important than others, which will be highlighted later on. But for now, we're just going to go over the basics of them. So this top toolbar is pretty much just to focus on the way to view your models and different options for them. So we have the save option, obviously, rotation, moving, zooming, and hiding objects. These are mainly the most important ones you'll be working with to start with. And as you go on, you'll start to see which ones are important and which ones are just kind of there for a more advanced use of the program. As we look to the left, you can see we have a lot of tool functions. So each of these have a very specific use. These first 8 up the top here are line commands. So these are pretty much just ways to draw lines, curves, boxes, and two-dimensional shapes. These tools here below that are going to signify how to work with surfaces. So if you click on the bottom right of each of these tools, they actually pan out to a bunch of other options that you can work with inside of them. So like extrusion to a point, surface of networks of curves. These are all tools that relate to working with surfaces. And as we go further on with the program, you'll see which ones you'll be needing to use for your model. As you go down a little bit further, you can see that there are other solid options. So when you have solids, there are a multitude of tools that you can work with, which are very helpful to create detail in your model. Below that, you have join and explode, which will be helpful for disconnecting objects so you can work with specific parts of your model, trimming and splitting specific parts, and then other lesser used tools like text, rotating, and scaling. And then on the bottom is also very important as well. These checkboxes at the bottom left here are to show you where you can interact with a specific part of your object. So if I drew a line, let's say in the top view, just like that, you can see that if we try to draw another line from it, it will snap to the end of the object because we have selected the end checkbox. And all these other commands are for very similar functions. If you had a box, you can connect right to the corner of it using vertex. Intercept is just any intercept within the line. Center and mid are for the center and mid lines. And point is just like a specific point. So end would also be considered a point. These options on the bottom as well, on the right side, are for how your line will be drawn. So grid snap is going to lock your point on a very specific interval on your grid. So if we went and turned that off, we can see we can work within that grid, but turning it back on, we actually snap to each corner. Ortho is going to keep you in a straight line. So if I drew a line like this, it's going to want to snap. But another way to work with ortho, you can draw the line and just hold shift, and it'll automatically make it a 90-degree angle with whatever X, Y, or Z plane you're working on. Planar keeps it on a specific level, so a specific plane to work on. And Smart Track is pretty much just a way to make sure that your points are locking together in a nice way. And Gumball is the last tool that's pretty important for moving around and scaling your objects. So if we selected this line here and turn on Gumball, you can see that there's a bunch of tools that you can work with within Gumball. So each of these little curves here, the blue, green, and the red, are going to represent a different way that you can rotate your object. So you can rotate on the X, Y, or Z plane using all of these tools. These arrows are used to move your object anywhere you want. And then these little lines here are, it's kind of hard to show because I drew a line, but let's say I drew just a box. When you select these lines, you can actually rescale your object. So that's pretty much the gist of all the tools. Now let's get into some of the functionality with the UI. So as you can see, I'm not using any of these tools on the top when I'm moving around or rotating. That's because there's a lot of shortcuts that you can use in the program. So when you have your mouse plugged in, if you hold Control and right mouse, you can zoom in and out of your object. If you hold Shift and right mouse, it'll move around in the plane. Or if you're just holding right mouse alone, you can rotate your object. Now, as you can see with the program, you're automatically given a conventional orthographic view of your model and a perspective view. But if you wanted to view your model in just one of these views, you can simply select by double-clicking the top left for your view. And if you wanted to go back, you just double-click it again, and then you're back to your normal spot. If you select the down arrow, you can see there's a bunch of different ways to view your model. So if I drew a box, so we select the box command, and we just look at this. So we can select the other shapes that we were working on. To select a shape or an object, you just use the left mouse button. And if you wanted to add another thing to that selection, you hold down Shift and left mouse again. Now, let's say we wanted to hide these objects. We just drop down our light bulb here and select Hide Object as the first one. And we can bring these back whenever we want by simply selecting the light bulb again. So let's double click this perspective and look at this in different views. If we pick Shaded, it can help really visualize what the solid will look like as an actual solid instead of just a wireframe model. And the last most important one would be Rendered. And Rendered is used to view your model more in like a real world scenario. So with proper lighting and shading, and here you can see later on in the series, you'll be able to see that we can add textures in the rendered view so that we can view our model very realistically.